All right, so today we're jumping right into a pretty huge shift that's happening in the business world. We're talking about a whole new playbook for how companies can actually do well, even thrive, when everything feels like it's constantly in flux. So you have to ask yourself, right? In a world that just feels like one crisis after another, what's the new formula for success? I mean, how do you even navigate all this chaos? Well, we're about to see how some of the smartest companies out there are finding an answer. And spoiler alert, it's not about playing defense. It's about completely rethinking what they're even in business for.
You know, if you think about it, the COVID-19 pandemic was like this massive global stress test. It took all these trends that were already bubbling under the surface and just hit the fast forward button. And it really laid bare how fragile a lot of our systems are. For businesses, it was a real wake-up call. It became crystal clear that the old ways of doing things, those traditional playbooks, they just weren't going to cut it anymore.
Okay, so what is the answer to all this disruption? Well, it's this idea of a new business logic. And honestly, it's a total shift in how we think about what a company is even supposed to do in the world. And this slide really gets to the heart of it. On one side, you've got the old way of thinking, right? Corporate social responsibility, or CSR. That's where doing good was kind of the side project, an extra department, something you did after you made your profit. It was basically a cost. But the new model, it's completely different. It weaves social good right into the very fabric of the business model. It's not profit versus purpose anymore. It's profit and purpose, working together.
And look, this is so important to get. This isn't just some feel-good, PR-friendly idea. Not at all. We're talking about a fundamental dollars and cents shift in what makes a company valuable in the first place. This is a real, hard-nosed business strategy.
And this chart, wow, this chart shows it all. If you look back to 1975, most of a company's value, over 80%, was intangible stuff, things you could physically touch, factories, equipment, inventory. Now, fast forward to 2020, it has completely inverted. A whopping 90% of market value is now in intangible assets. So what's that? It's the stuff you can't touch, your brand's reputation, your intellectual property, your software, and maybe most important of all, the talent and the culture of your people.
So if you follow that logic, right? If value is now all about these intangible human things, well, then it makes perfect sense that everything has to start at the top. It starts with the leaders, the architects of this change.
In this new era demands a new kind of leader, the purpose-driven leader. Think of them as having a compass. In a world that's complex and constantly changing, their company's purpose is their true north. It's what guides their big decisions, helps them navigate through the fog, and really empowers their people. They just don't see a conflict between profit and purpose. They see them as being totally connected.
So what do these leaders look like? Well, they tend to be really curious and human-centered. They're all about empowering people through that shared purpose. And this is the key. They totally reject that old false choice between making money and making the world a better place. For them, it's not a balancing act. The whole idea is that you create value for the business precisely because you're creating betterment for society.
And that means they get really good at, looking in two directions at once. They've got one eye on the here and now, the quarterly targets, the daily fires you have to put out. But they always keep their other eye on the long-term horizon, on that big picture vision that their purpose provides.
But, look, a great leader can only do so much on their own. That vision, that purpose, it has to be baked into the company's DNA. It has to become the culture. Because in today's world, that's your most valuable asset.
And this quote from Alan Murray at Fortune, it just nails it. Think back to that chart we just saw about intangible value. If the real value of your company comes from innovation and great ideas, then the environment that allows those ideas to flourish, your culture, that becomes your single most important piece of infrastructure, period.
And when researchers looked at the companies that really held up well during the pandemic, their cultures had three things in common. First, their purpose wasn't some new fad. It was grounded in the company's history and values. Second, they were radically transparent in how they communicated. And third, they used that foundation of trust to empower their people to innovate and solve problems.
A perfect example of this grounded in heritage idea is Johnson & Johnson. They have this document, their credo, that was written all the way back in 1943, and it clearly lays out their priorities. First comes patients and customers, then their employees, then their communities, and only then, last, come the shareholders. And that document, almost 80 years old, was the playbook they used to make every single major decision during the crisis.
Okay, so you've got the purpose-driven leader. Check. You've got the culture that brings it to life. Check. So what's next?
the blueprint. How do you turn all this into a strategy that actually changes things in the real world?
All right, let's look at an amazing case study to see how this works. Picture this. It's Kenya in the early 90s. Only 4% of the entire population has a bank account. So if you're Equity Bank, you're facing this massive question. How on earth do you bank the other 96%, the people everyone else has written off as unbankable?
And here's where they had a moment of pure genius. They realized their biggest competitor wasn't another bank like Barclays or Standard Chartered. No, their biggest competitor was the mattress. The literal practice of people stuffing their cash under the mattress at home.
So what did they do? They studied their competition. They asked, what are the product features of the mattress bank? Well, for one, it's got 100% liquidity. You can get your money whenever you want. There are 0 fees or charges. And hey, it's open 24/7.
So their strategy became incredibly simple but totally revolutionary. Beat the mattress. They designed a banking system that could compete on all those features. And by doing that, they didn't just help millions of people, they unlocked a huge untapped market and became massively successful. That is what systemic value creation looks like in action. And this kind of massive systemic change isn't a one-off. Just look at Ørsted, the Danish energy company. Back in 2007, they were basically a fossil fuel giant, responsible for a huge chunk of Denmark's CO2 emissions. Then they announced this insane, purpose-driven vision to completely flip their business to renewable energy. People thought they were crazy, but look what happened. In just over a decade, they went from being a coal company to the world's leader in offshore wind, an incredible transformation.
So when you put it all together, the market data, the leadership styles, these incredible case studies, the conclusion is pretty clear, isn't it? That old idea that you have to choose between purpose and profit, it's just obsolete. In the 21st century, doing good is good business.
Which, of course, leaves us with one last really big question to think about. If this new playbook, this new logic, can really be a force for good, if it can transform entire industries and solve huge problems, what should we point it at next? What are the biggest challenges in the world that this new way of doing business could help us solve?